And now we turn to the action in Congress. If the House does impeach President Trump, that is, of course, only the beginning of this process. Then the Senate holds a trial. And the big question everyone in the nation would wonder then is, could you really get a conviction? The Constitution requires a very high 2/3 majority vote to get conviction. Translation today, that would be 67 senators voting yes. So if every single Democrat and independent voted yes, they would still need to swing 20 Republicans to get a conviction of Donald Trump. The Senate has actually held 19 different types of impeachment trials in history. Those are mostly for tenured judges. Now, 73% of the judges who were impeached went on to be removed from office. Numbers are different, though, when you look at politicians. Only 1 out of 4 politicians removed through the process, a senator in the 1790s who was technically expelled in a complicated decision. The Senate has never, of course, as we've emphasized throughout our special, never convicted a sitting president. The 2 who were impeached did not ever reach that supermajority, meaning a 0% conviction rate in those 2 instances. Now, that's the history. Majority Leader McConnell says the Senate would have to take up impeachment and hold a trial if the House does this. Now, he's hinted that trial could be any length, which he also stressed potential speed ahead of the Clinton trial.
I think we could be through with this. The majority leader said from 3 days to 3 weeks. It's not a complicated case. I believe it can end very, very quickly. I think the one thing both the opponents of President Clinton and his friends agree with is that we'd like to have it over quickly.
Speed as a goal there. Well, it wasn't 3 days. It was just over a month for Clinton. About halfway through, there was a vote to also dismiss those charges.
A surprise twist today that could bring a quick end to a Senate trial that has paralyzed Congress. Senator Robert Byrd, the influential though unpredictable senior Democrat, says the trial should end, that the Senate will never have the votes to convict the president.
That was a major move. In a few days, there was a vote on the motion to dismiss, and it failed.
On this vote, the yeas are 44, the nays are 56. The motion is not agreed to.
Now, that Senate case was effectively managed or prosecuted by 13 House members. That included then Congressman Lindsey Graham. He argued the president does not have to commit a formal statutory crime to merit being kicked out of office.
You don't even have to be convicted of a crime to lose your job in this constitutional republic. If this body determines that your conduct as a public official is clearly out of bounds in your role. Impeachment is about cleansing the office. Impeachment is about restoring honor and integrity to the office.
I can tell you in both parties, we know from our reporting, today's senators looking back to see the lessons and mistakes, to see the precedents, to see what's expected of them. And that's not all. The people in our system of government who look back for a living, who interpret precedents, well, they're doing it too, including, I can bet you, one man in a different branch of government, Chief Justice John Roberts, because he will preside over any Senate trial of Trump, if there is a trial, just like his predecessor, William Rehnquist, did in the Clinton trial.
Senators, I attend the Senate in conformity with your notice for the purpose of joining with you for the trial of the President of the United States, and I'm now ready to take the oath.
I'm joined now by Judge Tim Lewis, appointed to the federal bench by President George H.W. Bush, and former Senator Byron Dorgan from North Dakota. He served during the Clinton impeachment trial and voted not guilty on both counts. Very special, and as I've emphasized, rare to have a federal appeals judge and a senator here together in this discussion. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Appreciate it. Judge, let's begin with you. What would define a fair trial of a president in the Senate?
Well, that's a good question. There have been so few that we really kind of have to look at history and look forward, as you mentioned earlier, to the legacy that might be left to determine how best to perform, I think, as both senators and as the Chief Justice presiding. I think that primarily we are looking for a decorum that rises above partisan politics to the extent possible. in order to ensure that the American people get what they deserve, which is a fair look at whatever the charges are that are brought by the Congress in the form of an impeachment might be. And we don't know what those are at this point. I think that in addition, the Chief Justice is going to have to adjust to a different environment. I'm not sure he's exactly relishing presiding at an impeachment trial. As you know, the Supreme Court has no cameras. It's a very different culture and a different environment. And so his presence and how he conducts business is going to also lend some definition to fairness and how things unfold.
Let me ask you about that. As a fellow judge, do you think this could become one of the most important things Chief Justice John Roberts ever does?
Well, as you know, the Supreme Court takes up the seminal issues and cases that we have to address as a society. So I'm not sure that I would go quite that far. But it certainly is a solemn responsibility. And it's, as I said, it's in a forum with which he does not have direct familiarity. So I think that learning about the rules of the Senate, there are specific rules governing the Senate impeachment process, relying on the parliamentarian for some insight and advice, and really letting the senators take center stage as opposed to the Chief Justice to do what they must do, hoping that they will rise to the occasion. I mean, the whole world is watching. The whole country is watching, and it's only charges against the President of the United States that could very well result in his removal.
Let me bring in the senator on that point. I mean, Senator Dorgan, whatever one's views of the case, which by the time it reached the Senate, the Clinton scandals had been well debated in American life. Right. Did your colleagues, did you see anyone walk out to the Senate floor as the trial actually commenced and hit and felt the gravity? We just showed some of the clips where they said, wait, this is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody understood this is a very sober moment. There is no joy in a United States Senate that convenes as a trial for prosecution of impeachment resolutions. It is a tough situation. Let me just tell you that as we began, there's not much of a template for how you proceed. As we began, all 100 of us met in the old Senate chambers and had an off-the-record discussion about how do we do this? I mean, what's the template by which we do this? Some, for example, wanted to call witnesses into the chamber of the Senate, bring Monica Lewinsky in, some of them said, so that she can be a witness in the trial. Well, the fact is that was discarded, and ultimately we got videotapes, and they were able to present videotapes. But so we went to the Senate floor as a trial, and we had to be sworn in separately as jurors. We had to sign an oath, and as you saw on the video, the Chief Justice was there in his black robe with his gold stripes on the arms, and we started. And it was very difficult. I mean, it started on January 7th, 20 years ago, and completed, I think, on February 12th.
Did that private room meeting that you're referencing, did it have, by the end, a consensus?
It did, and interestingly enough, the consensus was reached, as I recall, principally by Ted Kennedy and Phil Gramm, very different people with very different political perspectives. And so we came out of that old Senate chamber with an understanding of how we should proceed. And not everything went smoothly, but by and large, it was a very sober time because we understood the gravity of it.
It's hard to imagine in this pitched era when the basic facts and underlying evidence is not in much agreement, whether they could come to that. We'll be reporting out whatever comes if there is a Senate trial. Senator Dorgan, we pulled some of the then U.S. Senator Dorgan on the day of the acquittal. Take a look.
Every member of the Senate feels strongly about the president's conduct, but I think that the Constitution worked today. The United States Senate decided not to nullify the last election in this country as a result of the charges that were brought against this president.
The issues may be very different, but eagle-eyed viewers will note your reference to not nullifying the past election is
you're right.
What the president's lawyers have said this week about this effort.
but especially not nullifying the election over personal behavior. That's what this was about. This was about personal behavior, abhorrent as it was. But that's vastly different than behavior in which a president is asking a foreign government to intervene and to involve themselves in an election here in this country. That, by the way, is criminal. So, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that some really bad things have been happening and have happened. And I think this Senate will have to deal with those questions.
Yeah.
And they are not questions about personal behavior.
Judge Lewis, there's a question I have for you I've been waiting to ask all week since I had the opportunity to interview the president's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, earlier this week. He is taking the public position that it would be unfair, as a matter of general due process, to try to convict a president on anonymous testimony, people who can't be confronted. Now, we all know, I think most people, we all know the rules are different. There's no constitutional requirement of what merits due process. But what do you think about the substance of that argument? Do you think there's fairness there? Would it concern you to remove any president if it was primarily on anonymous testimony?
Look, the Constitution vests the authority to remove a president exclusively in the United States Senate. And other than that, it does not spell out any specific guarantees of due process or some amorphous notion of fairness, although we do hope that it is a fair process and procedure. It's a political process by nature. That argument does not work, and it will not work. No. The country really deserves a full airing of all of the charges that may be brought, whatever they might be and wherever they might lead. And we have reposed in our representatives the solemn responsibility to rise above politics to the extent possible and to do what they must do, what they've taken an oath to do, and to uphold the Constitution. You know, you had an earlier clip, Ari, in which you played that segment from the Watergate hearings when Barbara Jordan spoke. And her words give me chills every time I hear them. My faith in the Constitution is complete. My faith in the Constitution is complete, too. But it is only as good, and it will only rise to the level that we hope and expect to the extent that our representatives are able to do their job and to assume their oaths. And so, no, it's not an argument that is recognized in the Constitution. As you know, there are no rules of criminal procedure, civil procedure. This is a very unique proceeding. When the Senate is convened for this proceeding, it is convened as a court, a court of impeachment. Right. And so they will determine what the rules are and how things unfold.
Clarity, expertise, wisdom. I can't say we get that all day, every day from Washington, but we've certainly got it from both of you. Judge Lewis, former Senator Dorgan, thanks to both of you.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.